This first one will be, oh, maybe she'll say it, but Benita and the Binobodan, an Ifugao story, since we were already talking about Ifugao chant. So there you go, perfect.
Binobodan,
Oh yeah,
an
there you go.
Ifugao story. Written by Marlon Martin, edited by Liwliwang Malabed, illustrated by Kaizel Kotiwan. My name is Benita Balangto, 66 years old, and I am a weaver.
Oh.
I was born in the village of Kudog
Still
in
young.
Badawi, Ifugao. My mother, like most women in my village, was a weaver. I remember when I was a child, I was my mother's assistant. Every time I was out playing, I would hear my mother calling, waving rods and threads in her arms. I imagined those balls of yarn mocking me. They bounced around in my mind, so happy to see me dragged away from the games we used to play. Of course, I would grumble. My grumbling would continue while I passed the yarns to the loom header and then to my mother. Back and forth 1,000 times. I would have reached Kiangan and back again if I were to add all those little steps it took to warp a fabric just to make a tiny skirt for me. You can imagine my muttering when my mother decides to warp a whole blanket. Even now that I have grown up and have a family of my own, weaving is still part of my life. From a weaver's assistant, I decided to do weaving myself. In the weaving village of Amganad, Banawe, all my neighbors were weavers, and they were eager to teach me. We wove traditional garments that we sold to other villages. It was difficult at first, but just like my mother, my teachers were patient until I was able to perfect my first plain striped fabric. After mastering the weaving of
Nice.
palahan skirts of the Burnay people, I saw the binobodan or ikat fabric that the senior weavers were making for the Kiangan people. I heard of an old weaver who was a munbobod. Her name was Kitayan, and she was a master ikat weaver in the village. Kitayan knew the Amganad weaver, Kahimngan Palatik, who learned the ikat technique from the Kiangans and taught it to her villagers. They wove the traditional ikat loincloths and skirts of the Kadangyan, the Ifugao noble class. I visited Ina Kitayan and she willingly showed me how binobodan was done. It was harder than I imagined, but I wanted to learn, so I patiently followed the step-by-step process. Soon enough, I was bringing my first ikat weaves to the Banawe market and bringing home food for our family. I learned the standard designs for traditional Ifugao ikat, but I also came up with new ones. Again, the threads are beckoning to me. They are now my tools, my friends, my playmates. I think hard, play the patterns in my mind, visualize what it would look like. Then I start tying the patterns on the warp. There is no room for error, for there is no way of correcting your patterns once you cast the die. More people want to buy my binobodan, but one can only weave so much. So my boys and girls would assist me in the warping and winding threads into balls. You see, when you ask one to help you, you need to ask them all. Otherwise, you'll end up with no one. And just like my mother, I pulled them away from their games and taught them a skill they can use. I'm glad I did. 4 of my daughters are now weavers, and the art of binobodan lives within.
Oh, that's a nice one.
Amazing.
Yeah, I love those patterns, man. Yeah. Oh, it's such a great story.
Ifugao Nation, man. They're crazy.